into Stratford's past reveals a rich vein of stories from bygone days, often with their origins cloaked in mystery. This collection of strange and interesting tales from Stratford and the surrounding villages provides an intriguing glimpse into the lives of our ancestors, their beliefs and superstitions, and an unusual insight into our own history. When our Anglo-Saxon forebears colonized England, they brought with them their pagan religion and swept Christianity to the margins of our island. To the pagans, the forest of Arden that swathed most of Warwickshire was a magical place. It was home to the Waldgeist, the woodland spirit, the custodian of the forest and the protector of those who walked within it. Woodsmen and hunters entering the forest knocked on an old tree to awaken the Waldgeist to protect them from the vast array of malevolent or impish spirits that also dwelt here. Determined missionaries gradually persuaded the Saxons to embrace Christianity. When the King of Mercia converted early in the 8th century, he allowed missionaries to spread the word amongst his people, and in the churchyard at Weston-on-Avon is a fascinating relic from this period. The holy men erected stone crosses, often on old pagan sites, where the local people would gather to learn of this strange new religion. This well-weathered carved stone is the base and socket of an ancient preaching cross that became the focus of Christianity. Eventually, the simple stone crosses were replaced with more substantial structures, and in the village of Loxley is a wonderful example of an early English church. This is said to be one of the oldest churches in the country, and traces of its early Saxon stonework are still clearly visible. As the new faith spread, great centres of Christianity were established and became hugely wealthy from grants of land by powerful patrons. Many of the estates around Stratford were given to the Bishop of Worcester to support his fledgling cathedral. For example, it's recorded that in 760 AD, Loxley was given by King Offa of Mercia to Worcester Cathedral. Other bequests to the Bishop of Worcester included Bishopton, which means literally Bishop's Farm. But while the ordinary folk of Warwickshire were now Christians, the old ways were not forgotten completely. Country people maintained a cautious respect for the old pagan gods, which manifested itself in a host of superstitions, some of which persist to this day. For example, when we knock on wood for luck, we're repeating the practice of our pagan ancestors, who were evoking the Waldgeist for protection against evil. The Waldgeist was usually depicted as a carved face with leaves and twigs for hair and beard, an image that may well sound familiar. Better known to us as the Green Man, the Waldgeist appears all over Warwickshire, on cottages, even on churches, and has given his name to a number of pubs. Another enduring pagan symbol is the maypole. These ancient fertility emblems were originally brought in ceremoniously from the woods each May Day, erected on village greens and decorated with flowers as the central feature of the festivities. The handful that survive today, including the famous one at Welford-on-Avon, tend to be permanent fixtures. That any have survived at all is remarkable. For centuries they were opposed by the church because of their associations with paganism, immorality, and sinister memories of tree worship. They were eventually banned in 1644 by Oliver Cromwell's Puritan government, but such was the resilience of the old customs, they reappeared during the more relaxed reign of Charles II. A maypole has stood prominently in the centre of Welford ever since, although it has been replaced many times over the centuries. The current one is a former ship's mast and made of aluminium, and has so far proved rather more durable than its predecessors. Touch wood. Stratford's most famous son, William Shakespeare, would have been entirely familiar with the ancient beliefs and customs that surrounded him, and drew on them heavily in many of his works. In Warwickshire, to be mabbled was to be led astray by will-o'-the-wisp. Shakespeare recalled this piece of local folklore in Romeo and Juliet, when Mercutio jests with Romeo that Mab, the fairy queen and bringer of dreams, has visited his lovesick friend. Forest spirits feature prominently in A Midsummer Night's Dream, with the impish elf Puck making considerable mischief. According to a sign outside the Broom Tavern, the bard was quite capable of making mischief of his own. It shows him fast asleep under a crabapple tree, and is said to recall the aftermath of a drinking competition between a team from Stratford, including Shakespeare, and the Sippers from Bidford. The Stratford team was soundly thrashed, and on their way home fell asleep under the tree. When they awoke, one of their group suggested resuming the contest, but Shakespeare declined with typical eloquence. "No, I have drunk with piping Pebworth, dancing Marston, haunted Hilborough, hungry Grafton, dudging Exhall, papist Wexford, beggarly Broom, and drunken Bidford. I can drink no more." Piping Pebworth and dancing Marston is a reference to their once renowned Morris dancers. Hilborough was associated with several ghost stories. Dudging, applied to Exhall, is thought to mean ill-humoured. Temple Grafton had poor soil, which made growing crops difficult. Hence its folk were hungry. Beggarly Broom had many squatters. Papist Wexford was home to many well-known Catholics, and Bidford was renowned for its large number of pubs and the drinking capacity of its inhabitants. They have since been known as the Shakespeare Villages. Now, as everybody knows, Shakespeare was born in this house in Henley Street. Or was he? There's speculation by some knowledgeable individuals that his true birthplace was a couple of miles away, in the hamlet of Clifford Chambers. In the archives of the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust are some remarkable records that shed some light on life in Elizabethan Stratford. The language has been modernised to make the records more understandable, but the details have been copied accurately. This entry is from 1564, the year of Shakespeare's birth. The plague eventually arrived in Stratford, and before the end of the year, over 200 people had been buried, about 1/5 of the population of the town. Another entry in the archive tells us only a few families like John Shakespeare's had escaped this epidemic entirely. His son, William, born in April, is still alive. The rectory at Clifford Chambers was used as a refuge by Stratford's well-to-do during times of plague. William's parents had already lost 2 children to the disease, and as his father John was a prominent alderman of the town, it's entirely plausible that he would send his pregnant wife to the refuge of Clifford's old rectory. While some have questioned the place of his birth, there's little doubt that Shakespeare grew up in this house, and it now attracts many thousands of visitors from all over the world. Mind you, if they'd been here in Shakespeare's time, they might not have hung around. The archives paint a pretty horrible picture of the town. A problem which is causing increasing concern to the corporation is refuse disposal. There are perfectly good muck heaps at the bottom of Bridge Street, Shute Street, and the top of Scholars Lane and Queenhill Street. Yet people will keep making dunghills over the town. 8 people were fined at the April Court, including the bailiff John Shakespeare, for piling their muck outside of their front doors. 4 others have been making a heap outside the unfortunate Richard Lane's barn in Ely Street, and 5 others have been doing the same next to the Guild Chapel. It has been ordered that butchers give up the rather unpleasant custom of throwing the heads and innards of their slaughtered animals into the street. The number of stray animals in the town is causing considerable concern, and in October the corporation agreed to appoint someone who would impound all stray horses, pigs, geese, ducks and cattle found within the borough, especially on the Bancroft. The ancient records also provide some fascinating glimpses into Shakespeare's early life, and indicate that John Shakespeare may have unwittingly sparked his son's interest in the theatre. An interesting development during John Shakespeare's term of office has been the encouragement of travelling players who visit the town from time to time. In August, the Queen's Players were here and gave a performance before the bailiff and corporation in the Guild Hall, for which they were paid 9 shillings. Let us hope that this patronage will continue, as these visits certainly help to liven up the town a little. Shakespeare Jr., it seems, was hooked. All too often, William is to be found hanging